My father had 5 children and some grandchildren when his wife passed away and he became a widower. He raised his children on his own for a few years until he met my mother. At that time, my mother was called an old maid because in the countryside everyone got married so young that when a mature woman got married, there was this prejudice. But my mother was at the height of her maturity. She was so mature that she embraced my father and my father's children and my father's grandchildren as if they were her own. And she helped finish raising both the children and the grandchildren. And soon after, she had 3 more children with my father, my older brother, my sister, and me. Well, each one got married, started their own lives, and then it was just the 3 of us with our parents. We also grew up, and my brother decided to go to the big city because there were more job opportunities in the capital. My sister got married because everyone used to get married earlier, and she went on to live her own life. And then it was just me, my mother, and my father. I was very attached to my mother, and to my father too. At that time, I remember that my niece, her mother also passed away, and she came to live with us. Because my mother has a heart big enough for everyone. There's always room for one more. So it was the 3 of us there, and I took care of that niece as if she were my own daughter. And incredibly, that niece grew up, found a husband, got married young, and went on with her life, leaving just me again. It was a time when I also wanted to understand where I was going, what I was going to do, like how I was going to make it in life, if I was going to get married or not. That's when I decided to visit the capital to see my brother. I went there and all, and since my family is really big, back in the countryside and in the big city, we have relatives. A cousin of mine from the big city said, "Hey, I think I can get you a job." I said, "Well, then do it. I want it." But it didn't work out. They hired someone else, so I went back to the countryside, right? It was fine. When I came back from the countryside, it was just a matter of days before we got the news that my brother fought back during a robbery. And that was it. He ended up being killed. They shot him, it was point blank. It was very painful for all of us at home. My mother, she suffered a lot. I remember it was a time when I was suffering and I tried not to cry in front of my mother. I hid my pain from her because I didn't want her to suffer twice. When a mother sees her child in pain, she suffers too, right? I remember all the times I held back my tears, that I swallowed my tears so my mother wouldn't see me suffering so much, because it was a very sad time for all of us. But of course, after all that turbulence, life goes on. We have to keep going. We have to be strong. It was very hard, very painful. But we kept going. Some time passed, and that cousin of mine who lived in the capital, the one who told me about the job, said she managed to get a job for me and that I could go to the capital. Of course, my mother didn't want that, right? Someone who lives in the countryside, lost her son in the big city because of a robbery. Clearly, the capital was a dangerous place, too risky to imagine sending a second child there. So my mother did everything she could to keep me from going. But I needed to succeed. I also wanted to understand where I was going to end up. So even though my mother tried everything, fought hard to keep me from going, I went to the capital. I started working at a family's house, but whenever I could, I was back in the countryside. Every weekend, I was there with my parents. And then it was during one of those visits I went to see my parents, and when I came back to the big city, we got the news that my father had passed away. So that was the second loss in the family. It was very it was very hard too. Losing a brother and a father was very painful. And for my mother, losing a son, losing a husband, it was very difficult. But at that time, my aunt, she was always there with my mother. So I knew she would take care of my mother. I knew she would be there and give her that support because I needed to keep going. And I was building my life in another city. There was no way I could leave everything and go back. So the fact that my sister was in the countryside with my mother gave me peace of mind to keep going with my life. And that's when I met my first husband. He was a good man. He was a hardworking man, but he developed an illness because of drinking. He developed an illness. And this illness was a bacterial infection that kept coming back. So my husband was always in the hospital. He was always at the hospital, and he would spend long periods in the hospital. He was hospitalized, returned home, then went back to the hospital, stayed longer, and came home again. During this period, I had my first child, and it was a very delicate situation because I needed to work and I needed to take care of a child. I had to take care of the house. And I needed to support us because my money was for our living expenses. My husband's money was completely used for medicine and exams. There was nothing left. I couldn't expect anything to be left for us. So in the middle of all this, when my son was 3 years old, we were still going back and forth between the hospital and home. I was at the hospital when I got an offer that shook me to my core. Someone came up to me with a newborn baby and asked if I wanted to take that child as my own. It was so overwhelming. Imagine being offered to keep a child, a baby that had just been born, you know? So many thoughts ran through my mind, like, how will I support this child? My husband in the hospital, me with a small child, my money barely covers us. How am I going to support another one? But I couldn't say no. When you get an offer like this, it's like God is giving you the chance to, I don't know, embrace the gift he's giving you. There's no way. I was left not knowing what to do, and I just accepted it. And right then, she became my second daughter. It was overwhelming at the time, right? Taking care of two children with my husband in the hospital and going through all that turmoil. But when my husband came home during one of those times, he fell in love with our second daughter, you know? And he was so happy, he was so joyful, he gave himself completely, to being her father. And I was very happy because there was that sparkle in his eyes too, a new baby in our home. Of course, it was only a matter of time before he returned to the hospital. On one of those returns home, I got pregnant with my third daughter. And then when my daughter was 4 months old, he had another one of those episodes that sent him to the hospital. But this time, there was no coming back. And I found myself with a newborn baby, having just finished going through my postpartum period with, whether I wanted it or not, 3 children, working, taking care of the house, taking care of the kids, and without my husband, burying my husband, going to my husband's wake with a baby who had just been born. It was very overwhelming for me. And that marked the third loss in my life of my brother, my father, and now my husband. Of course, I felt completely lost. I had nowhere to go. And by the way, after my father died, I never went back to that town in the countryside. I never went back there. I tried to stay in touch however I could, but back then there weren't even telephones. Yeah, cell phones weren't something everyone had like they do nowadays. And there I went, living my life with those 3 children and with those 3 losses inside me. But it was just a matter of time. If I'm not mistaken, a few months after I buried my husband, I met a man, a good man, a hardworking man, an honest man, that he had compassion. He felt sympathy, for my story, for my children. And he wanted to embrace that family as his own. He wanted to take care of us, and that's what happened. And with him there, I was starting a new story in my life, a new chapter, a new episode. Shortly after I got together with him, I got pregnant with my fourth child and his first child. And at that time, he was starting to drink. And I used to say, no, you can't go down that path. Why? Because my ex-husband, I had just lost my ex-husband exactly because of something that alcohol caused in him. He couldn't go down the same path. And that's what he did. He let go. He gave up some things in his life so he could give us a better life. During that time, we got married in church, which was a dream I had. We had our life the way we always wanted, and we moved forward with our lives. But during that time, my husband, my current husband, thought it was absurd that my mother didn't know her grandchildren. About my mother, about me not having gone back to see my mother since my father's death. So he worked, he saved up the money, and he sent both me and my children to my mother's house so we could see her again. She met her grandchildren, right? And that's how it was. She met them and everything, and we kept living our lives. As soon as I returned to the big city, I had my fifth daughter, and a year later, I had my sixth and last child. And during that time, our situation was a little better, right? So I ended up setting up a workspace in my house. I started working with making clothes. My husband worked and supported our household. And that's when things started to get a little better, right? Because after all, I could work from home, take care of my children. My husband was doing well. We had bought a car. We had gotten our first cell phone. So I got in touch with my sister from the countryside. Then I started talking to her. And everything was going so well that it's bizarre, right? It seems like when things are going well, something bad has to happen. That's when I found out my husband had cheated on me for the first time. That really shook me to my core. I've never been a woman who settles for less. I've never been a woman who accepts these kinds of situations, you know? So I found all of that very harsh, very painful. And that's when I decided I would go back to the countryside to try to claim my retirement benefits there. I was already getting older, you know? I already had many children. I said, I think it'll be better for me over there, so it's better if I go back. So I only went there to try to claim my retirement benefits. But when I got there, I realized that the best and healthiest thing would be for me to stay in the city. So that's what I did. I decided to come back. And during this period after I came back, just so you know, I spent many years living well, you know, raising my children. Our first child was already grown up, you know, already working. The other one was already studying. So in a way, the kids were kind of split between us. Some went, some stayed with their father, others stayed with me. And I just kept getting on with my life. Well, during all that time, I was very hurt by my husband. He regretted it, and he really regretted it, you know. He kept wanting us to stay together. He wanted the relationship. He asked for forgiveness. He really wanted us to be happy, but I kept it all to myself because I always had this deep sense of anguish inside me, you know. I'm not going to accept just anything. And I decided to set up the structure I had there inside my own house. Boom. Well, currently I'm still married to him, but he lives in the big city and I live here in the countryside. And I share my story because we lived together for a long time. He was very special and very important to me during many periods, many times in my life. He is the father of my children, right? He helped raise my children, and we have a relationship. But he lives there and I live here. And as incredible as it may seem, I don't feel like living in the same place as him. And we work out. He helps me financially. Every time he comes, he visits me once a month. He always brings me gifts. He makes sure that we never lack anything, right? He always tries to keep this relationship. And despite the hurt, I accept it. I still work in garment making. In fact, I'm one of the best in the region. I'm very well known for what I do. I haven't been able to retire. I keep fighting. But one thing I always tell people is that a relationship is based on forgiveness, and that's also how it works out. Have you noticed that nowadays on the internet, everyone has a formula for making relationships work? Honestly, nothing works better than a mutual understanding. Nothing works better than you knowing what's best for you. I know that he loves me and he does everything for me, but today I just can't live in the same house. Today, I can't live under the same roof. For me, for the relationship to stay healthy, it has to be the way it is now. It has to be comfortable for me. It has to be comfortable for him. I don't feel like getting involved with other people, just like I believe he doesn't either. Otherwise, he wouldn't leave there every month and come here and care so much about us. But whatever happens, you know. So I like to share because I feel like my life is a repeated pattern. Because when we look at my mother's story, it was the opposite. My father died, right? And my mother helped raise us. And in my story, my husband died and someone else helped me raise my children, you know? And things work the way they have to work. But today, I choose to be the way I am. Don't think that a relationship needs a little magic formula like some powder you sprinkle on the couple and you'll be happy forever. I had wonderful times. I had very sad times. And today, this is how it works. Each in their own house, but we still love each other just the same. Hi, how are you guys? How are you all doing? Today, I'm bringing this story exactly because of that little part at the end where she talks about the secret formula for relationships, right? It's very rare to find a couple who live apart, who've been married for so many years, who have so many kids, and one lives in one place and the other lives somewhere else, and it still works just the same. And many times we think it has to be our way, it has to be like this, otherwise it won't work, it has to be done this way. So this story is first of all an example of resilience, right? Because she lost many people there. She lost her brother, she lost her father, she lost her husband, right? But she had the strength to go on, and this repetition happened within her family system, right? Today we need to understand that we have a family tree, and this family tree has cycles that repeat themselves, you know? I always say that everything that repeats within your family is like a little fruit that grew on your tree. So if there were many miscarriages, that's a little fruit, right? If there are many people with mental health issues, that's a little fruit. There are many people who separate, who are married, who were abandoned. There are so many issues, and it's very important for you to look at that. But the point is to look at this woman's strength and how she sees herself, how she presents herself, and what she allows for herself based on what she understands about herself. She is an adult woman, a mature woman, a mother, a woman who has an established career, and even so, she is married. She is married because she forgave. She is married because she chose to make the relationship work differently, and it works. So many times we want to do things one way and they end up working out another way. Well, do you also know couples who live apart? If you also lost many people in your family, how did you deal with that? Leave a message of love, care, and affection in the comments for this woman, okay? Who lost so many people so she can feel supported, so she can feel loved. And also, send me your story at historiascanalditipaloba@gmail.com. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Kisses, and see you in the next video.